Gundam TCG is probably some of the most fun I've ever had playing a card game in a long while, with how easy it is to learn, as well as the diversity of how one can build decks in this game, and of course the wonderful people that I've met and bonded with over the course of playing the game for the year. However, admittedly, there is a gigantic glaring issue that anybody familiar with the game can see from a mile away that really does hamper its ability to recruit new players, which is something that has literally been plaguing the game since day one. And that is the fact that most of the best decks and builds that this game has require one of two pilot combos that are so good they are splashable into their own respective colors, with those needing no introduction in being Gundam Amuro and Ailstrike Kira. Now, normally this wouldn't be too big of an issue, as anybody who's played a card game before knows that, yeah, the top of the levels are always going to be dominated by one or two or maybe five big cards that absolutely break the game. However, there is a massive, and I mean massive, issue here that has been, once again, plaguing this game since day one, and that is Bandai heavily underestimating the demand of the game in the West, which has led to a very bad situation where the two combos listed are incredibly scarce at this very moment. And this is an issue made all the more worse by the fact that, at the beginning, Bandai heavily underestimated the demand that the game would have in the West, and combine that with the fact of scalping being a massive issue alongside the fact that these are starter decks, so once again, these are the products you are supposed to purchase to get into the game. It left a massive scarcity hole to the point where these cards that, according to every other structure deck out there, should be retailing on the secondary market for no more than $5, have ballooned in price all the way up to $30 to sometimes even $40, and let's not even get started on the LR pluses, because holy shit, the scarcity has gotten so bad that the LR Plus Gundam is nearly $200, when for the longest time it was barely hovering above $70, which is insane. And it's this storm of events that has caused the fact that for beginners, and once again, for beginners, if you want to play blue or white at a very competitive level, you are going to need to shell out over $100 for only 8 cards. And that's if you are not running a blue and white deck, because otherwise that's going to be $200 you're going to have to pay for a playset of both cards. And if you want to run multiple decks and don't want to swap out sleeves constantly, well, guess what? You're going to keep bringing up that cash register, which is where I and this video come in. I want to give beginners a rundown on some of the decks that the game has to offer that do not absolutely require Gundam Amuro or Strike Ale Kira. Because there's actually a really solid amount of decks that the game has to offer that you can manage to operate at a competent level without those two combos. Now, first, let's set some ground rules, because obviously a list like this is going to need some. The first one, well, I just said it. The deck must not rely on Gundam Amuro or Ailstrike Kira for viability. And while this is self-explanatory, if it requires either one of those to be able to work competently, then it's out of this list. However, if the deck's viability instead is heavily bolstered and absolutely not required by them, then the deck is fair game. Number 2, the deck must come under $50. Remember, if we have to spend more than $100 for the deck or any of the cards in the deck, then we're out, because if we're spending over $100, we might as well buy either of the two combos listed above. Also, we won't be taking alt arts into account for this list, because once again, this is for beginners and we're trying to stay on budget here. We'll also be taking prices from TCG player into account from the date you're currently seeing on screen when I'm editing this video. And finally, and this is probably arguably the other most obvious one, the deck has to be viable to run. This video and list as a whole does not matter at all, because there is no point in giving a beginner a deck that will utterly fail them consistently. We won't be handing people decks like Oz or Galahorn in this video. The deck must be able to take into a locals and not utterly get decimated on sight. We are not trying to win a new type here. We are simply trying to get beginners a deck that will not only be fun, but also, have them go at least 2-2 or 1-2 at locals. So, now with all of that said, let's get into the list and see what are some of the decks that you as a beginner should pick up. Number 5. Number 5 on this list is Mono Zeon. Now, Zeon is one of the most iconic and important parts of the original Mobile Suit Gundam, and has been adapted into the Gundam TCG as a mid-range rush deck. Zeon as a whole in this game has actually seen a decent amount of success in the form of the one-year war decks that dominated the meta for 2 sets in a row. The deck strategy relies on running smaller units to punish the opponent's shields all the way down to 0 so fast that the opponent won't be able to respond. However, with recent support, Zeon can actually even be built for the mid-game with cards such as the G-Fred and the upcoming Zeon that allow you to strike much harder in the mid-game to deliver a devastating effect and make sure you don't burn out. However, like I just said, that is the main issue with this deck. Much like a fireworks sparkler, Zeon burns so very brightly in the early game. However, you do quickly burn out, because neither green nor red have consistent filter or replenishment cards. If your opponent can somehow survive the early barrage, or you simply get an unlucky hand, it can quickly spell disaster for this deck as bigger and bigger units come out on your opponent's side that are nearly impossible for this deck to handle or trade favorably into, which is why this deck falls so low onto our list. However, the fact that this deck will always be receiving new support as well as a lot of updated cards simply just due to Zeon's spot in the franchise, it's a pretty safe investment overall, alongside with the fact that there's just so many unique ways to build Zeon as a whole that it's basically perfect in terms of just being able to adjust on the fly what you want as a player and what the meta demands to get the most out of it. That, alongside with how cheap a lot of the Zeon cards are to obtain, easily makes this a very good recommendation that I would give to new players. Number 4. Coming in swinging at number 4 is ZAFT. ZAFT, for the longest time in this game's history, was a mediocre deck at most, with the stance changing very, very quickly as soon as we got not only the new structure deck that came out last month, but as well as an insane boss card that solves most of the deck's problems upon pairing with a ZAFT pilot. Between the Providence and the Impulse Gundams, a lot of the recent support has left what was once a joke deck into one that absolutely requires respect before it overwhelms you with the force that it can blast you away with. And it's all this recent support that has left what was once a joke deck into one that absolutely requires respect before its overwhelming force can blast the opponent away. They can easily overwhelm you with brute strength by increasing their own firepower, or by burning your cards away with stuff like the Savior or Providence. Unfortunately though, there's still a glaring issue for the archetype, for most of the original support anyway, as a lot of their effects require you to be 5 AP or higher in order for them to trigger. With the key issue of this being that, you have to do a lot of dedicated resource setup or unit setup in order to get those effects off. Granted, effects such as the Lego or the Dual Gundam already do have solid effects. It's just simply the fact that until you meet the AP requirements, they're basically just glorified vanillas. And while it has been made easier to achieve these effects, it still requires you to set them up in the first place, which can have an effect on the deck's consistency. Now, I know what some of you are probably saying and thinking right now, but why don't you just run purple-white? It's a really solid ZAFT deck. It's been topping new types. It's been doing really well. Until you realize that, well, yes, the Ultimate Structure deck does give you another Kira to work with. It doesn't give you an Ailstrike, which is a very key component to that part of the deck, which is why ZAFT is this low on the list, simply because you're restricted to basically playing red and white, but without Ale. Or you could just play red-purple, which actually functions pretty easily. Combine that with the fact that Seed's basically Gundam TCG's sweet old baby child, means that this is once again another deck that is going to get legacy support continuously throughout the game, as well as the fact that with the release of the recent Ultimate Structure deck, you now have multiple ways to get some of the best cards in the deck. So, you know, go ahead, buy up the Ultimate Structure deck and see what works. Number 3. Delivering intervention on our list, coming in at number 3, is Celestial Being. Now, Celestial Being is one of the newer kids on the block, and man has it been a roller coaster. Although many decry the deck's consistency and its lack of ability to stay within a singular color, I would still say the deck still has a really good spot in the game for being beginners. One of the greatest pluses to this is the fact that this is a starter deck that came out after all of the drama about Bandai not printing enough, which means that the starter deck containing most of, if not all the cards required, is easily out there and available for purchase at a retail price. Combine this with the fact that sets 3 and 4 have basically been dedicated to constantly improving this deck, makes it a really solid investment, as well as the fact that Lock-On Dynamis is pretty much a budget replacement for the Gundam Amuro combo, which could even fit into the Zeon deck as mentioned earlier, since Lock-On Dynamis is also a green card. To make this even crazier, the support for the archetype is nowhere near complete, as even with GDO4 coming out and releasing the boss monster equivalent for every single one of Celestial Being's pilots, we still got the second season and an entire film left of support for this archetype. And while yes, the deck does struggle with consistency as of writing this video, as soon as the new support comes out, as well as the Season 2 and film support, this is an archetype that will not want to be messed with. Number 2. Coming in at number 2 is probably the most controversial pick on this list. The Titans. Okay. Hear me out. You do not need Gundam Amuro or Ailstrike Kira for this deck to be good. The Titans archetype as a whole is focused on endless aggression and swarm tactics to overwhelm the opponent no matter the stage of the game. The early game can be seen with swarms of Hyzak and low-cost Jupitrus units, with the mid-game being followed up with cards such as Psycho Gundam, or top-ended with cards such as the O. And while yes, Kira and Amuro absolutely make this deck a meta threat, the inherent tribalism that has been built into the deck since day one allows plenty of generic links with really solid effects, going as far as even having a mini Amuro in the form of Sarah, who can rest all low-level blockers. And of course, the late game for this deck being utterly insane, with cards such as the Psycho Gundam or the O being threats that must be checked on sight before they get out of control. Because of all this inherent tribalism, the adaptability of this archetype is just absolutely insane, as you can either play the O deck with a lot of Jupitrus units, or you could play just generic Titans with plenty of early game pressure cards such as Sarah or the Bolonok Saman, as well as things such as the Masala that would just simply buy you time to put out your bigger guys, or better yet, swarm the field. And because this is blue, you have plenty of access to a lot of draw and recursion within the deck. Not to mention what else you could shove into this thing. You could easily shove in some green for some early game push, such as Rikdom. You could easily shove in some white for some early game blockers, such as Lefrith, or you could even filter out with Overflowing. The possibilities are absolutely endless. And I think the most important part, and the reason why this deck is up here so high, is that you do not need to buy a starter deck to play Titans. Unlike everything above, everything in the archetype is pullable from GDO2 and GDO3, with a massive majority of these cards being commons. The deck is so easily affordable for this reason, with even the most expensive cards in the archetype not exceeding $10. It's cheap, it's flexible, and can benefit extremely well by obtaining the Amuro and Kira package, making upgrades for this deck absolutely insane. With all of that laid out, what more could you ask for, personally? However, before we get into our number one option, let me cover some honorable mentions that didn't make the list or just barely skimmed. Tekkadan/Teiwaz. Honestly, this deck probably would have taken the number 1 or 2 spot had it not been the fact that Barbados First Form, which is, by the way, nearly necessary for the entire deck to work, is a $20 to $25 card that blows our budget out of the water. Remember, we are trying to keep the decks that you can play in this video below $50, and when an absolutely necessary part of the deck basically covers about half of that, it kind of disqualifies itself. Cyclops team. This one falls a wee bit short of its potential, being a bit weaker than generic Zeon Rush, but it does have all the benefits of all archetypal support, with it being exclusive to a set and not a structure deck once again, making the deck extremely affordable for anybody to play. However, I simply don't think in its current state that it's as strong as other things on the list. I mean, yeah, it's a really fun deck that I would recommend for beginners because it teaches a lot of important things about the card game, but on the other hand, man, can it really struggle at times. And finally, the last two I want to mention before we get to number one is Victory Gundam and Turn A decks. And this is simply because they haven't come out yet, so we don't exactly know if they're going to be budget-friendly, as well as the fact that we don't exactly know how they're going to perform. I personally think that these two archetypes are going to perform actually really well, with Turn A's flexibility of being able to steal keywords, basically meaning it can replace almost any card you need, and Victory having so much good support within archetype that it might be able to actually stand out on its own pretty damn well. But once again, they're not out yet, and who knows, maybe they will be, maybe they won't. I plan on updating this in 6 months, so they might be on the list, who knows. But with all that out of the way, what is number one? Number one. Number one is Clan. I mean, for those who are at all knowledgeable about the game scene, was there any ever doubt? Clan as a whole has been heavily pushed into the game since its starter deck launch, and has become a very quick fan favorite, as well as hated child of the community, with the deck receiving massive, and I mean massive, loads of support from Bandai in the past 2 sets, as well as with how easy it is to obtain the cards needed for this deck now that it was part of the first wave of structure deck reprints, as well as the fact that how many variants can be run due to the amount of cards given to it within that time period. Similar to Zeon and Titans, the deck really can be adjusted for almost any budget or playstyle the player wants. Plug this alongside that the fact that it has one of the few archetypal search cards within the deck, as well as one of the best boss units in the game that is searchable within archetype, and Clan truly is the little deck that could. In fact, around the time of writing this video, Clan actually has taken home its first new type challenge win in Japan, truly showing the dedication that the fanbase of this deck has, as well as how potentially strong the deck can operate. And that's it for the video. Please be sure to tell me what you guys think, as I think this video could be a really good talking point for what we should be recommending to beginners to get into this game, as I know I'm not the end-all be-all. Hell, I'm pretty sure the Titan's opinion is going to get this video absolutely dislike bombed, as well, with a lot of angry comments in the comment section below. But, you know, I want to hear more from the community, because I really think that we should be doing all that we can to make sure beginners getting into this game don't have to spend $100 on required cards. And that's the main purpose I made this video, because that's just something I constantly see, is people recognizing that they need these cards to succeed in this meta, but they just don't have access to them, and as a result, they kind of struggle a lot. So be sure to list your deck recommendations in the comment section. Let's start a conversation. And be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos like this on the channel. I know this was the first time, and it's probably going to be very sloppy because I haven't made something this heavily edited in a while, but, you know, I had fun making it. So be sure, like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you guys on Friday with another VOD.